Description of a plan for the improvement of the Central Park *******. Transcribers note footnote anchors are denoted by number, and the footnotes have been placed at the end of the book. Some minor changes to the text are noted at the end of the book. The new original cover art included with this ebook is granted to the public domain. 1858 Central Park. 1868. Meantime, with cheap land, and the pacific disposition of the people, everything invites to the arts of agriculture, of gardening, and domestic architecture. Public gardens on the scale of such plantations in Europe and Asia, are now unknown to us. There is no feature of the old countries that strikes an American with more agreeable surprise than the beautiful gardens of Europe, such as the Boboli, in Florence, the Villa Borghese, in Rome, the Villa d'Este, in Tivoli, the gardens at Munich, and at Frankfurt on the Main, works easily imitated here, and which might well make the land dear to the citizen, and inflame patriotism. Emerson, 1844. Description of a plan for the improvement of the Central Park. Greensward. F. L. Olmsted Calvert Vors. New York, 1858. Reprinted 1868. The Aldine Press. Sutton, Bone and Company, 23 Liberty Street, NY. Note, 1868. The following description was prepared in 1858 to accompany the first study of our design for the Central Park, the appended woodcut being printed with the report. A few notes are added in this edition, together with a map showing to what extent the intention of the plan has, thus far, been realized and in what manner the study has been elaborated. O&V Report. Topographical suggestions. A general survey of the ground allotted to the park, taken with a view to arrive at the leading characteristics which present themselves as all-important to be considered in adapting the actual situation to its purpose, shows us, in the first place, that it is very distinctly divided into two tolerably equal portions, which, for convenience sake, may be called the upper and lower parks. The upper park. The horizon lines of the upper park are bold and sweeping, and the slopes have great breadth in almost every aspect in which they may be contemplated. As this character is the highest ideal that can be aimed at for a park under any circumstances, and as it is in most decided contrast to the confined and formal lines of the city, it is desirable to interfere with it, by crossroads and other constructions, as little as possible. Formal planting and architectural effects, unless on a very grand scale, must be avoided, and as nearly all the ground between the reservoir and 106th Street, west of the Boston Road, is seen in connection, from any point within itself, a unity of character should be studiously preserved in all the gardening details. The lower park. The lower park is far more heterogeneous in its character and will require a much more varied treatment. The most important feature in its landscape is the long rocky and wooded hillside lying immediately south of the reservoir. Inasmuch as beyond this point there do not appear to be any leading natural characteristics of similar consequence in the scenery, It will be important to draw as much attention as possible to this hillside, to afford facilities for rest and leisurely contemplation upon the rising ground opposite, and to render the lateral boundaries of the park in its vicinity as inconspicuous as possible. The central and western portion of the lower park is an irregular tableland. The eastern is composed of a series of graceful undulations, suggesting lawn or gardenesque treatment. In the extreme south we find some flat alluvial meadow, but the general character of the ground is rugged and there are several bold, rocky bluffs that help to give individuality to this part of the composition. Such being the general suggestions that our survey has afforded, it becomes necessary to consider how the requirements of the commissioners, as given in their instructions, may be met with the least sacrifice of the characteristic excellences of the ground. Preliminary considerations. Up to this time, in planning public works for the City of New York, in no instance has adequate allowance been made for its increasing population and business, not even in the case of the Croton Aqueduct, otherwise so well considered. The City Hall, the best architectural work in the state, and built to last for centuries, does not at this time afford facilities for 1/3 the business for which it was intended. The present post office, expensively fitted up some 10 years ago, no longer answers its purpose, and a new one of twice its capacity is imperatively demanded. The Custom House, expressly designed for permanence and constructed to that end at enormous expense less than 20 years ago, is not half large enough to accommodate the present commerce of the city. The explanation of this apparently bad calculation is mainly given with the fact that, at every census since that of 1860, the city's rate of increase has been found to be overrunning the rate previously established. A wise forecast of the future gave the proposed park the name of Central. Our present chief magistrate, who can himself remember Market Gardens below Canal Street, and a post and rail fence on the north side of City Hall Park, warned his coadjutors, in his inaugural message, to expect a great and rapid movement of population toward the parts of the island adjoining the Central Park. A year hence, 5 city railroads will bring passengers as far up as the park, if not beyond it. Recent movements to transfer the steamboat landings and railroad stations, although as yet unsuccessful, indicate changes we are soon to expect. The 17,000 lots withdrawn from use for building purposes in the park itself, will greatly accelerate the occupation of the adjoining land. Only 20 years ago, Union Square was out of town. 20 years hence, the town will have enclosed the Central Park. Let us consider, therefore, what will at that time be satisfactory, for it is then that the design will have to be really judged. No longer an open suburb, our ground will have around it a continuous high wall of brick, stone, and marble. The adjoining shores will be lined with commercial docks and warehouses, steamboat and ferry landings, railroad stations, hotels, theaters, factories, will be on all sides of it and above it, all which our park must be made to fit. The demolition of Columbia College, and the removal of the cloistral elms which so long enshadowed it, the pertinacious demand for a division of Trinity Churchyard, the numerous instances in which our old graveyards have actually been broken up, the indirect concession of the most important space in the City Hall Park for the purposes of a thoroughfare, and the further contraction it is now likely to suffer, together with the constant enormous expenditure of the city and sacrifices of the citizens, in the straightening and widening of streets, are all familiar facts that teach us a lesson of the most pressing importance in our present duty. To its application we give the first place in our planning. The transverse roads. Our instructions call for 4 transverse roads. Each of these will be the sole line of communication between one side of the town and the other, for a distance equal to that between Chambers Street and Canal Street. If we suppose but one crossing of Broadway to be possible in this interval, we shall realize what these transverse roads are destined to become. Inevitably they will be crowded thoroughfares, having nothing in common with the park proper, but everything at variance with those agreeable sentiments which we should wish the park to inspire. It will not be possible to enforce the ordinary police regulations of public parks upon them. They must be constantly open to all the legitimate traffic of the city, to coal carts and butchers' carts, dust carts and dung carts. Engine companies will use them, those on one side the park rushing their machines across it with frantic zeal at every alarm from the other. Ladies and invalids will need special police escort for crossing them, as they do in Lower Broadway. 8 times in a single circuit of the park will they oblige a pleasure drive or stroll to encounter a turbid stream of coarse traffic, constantly moving at right angles to the line of the park movement. The transverse roads will also have to be kept open, while the park proper will be useless for any good purpose, after dusk, for experience has shown that even in London, with its admirable police arrangements, the public cannot be secured safe transit through large open spaces of ground after nightfall. Foreign examples. These public thoroughfares will then require to be well lighted at the sides and, to restrain marauders pursued by the police from escaping into the obscurity of the park, strong fences or walls, 6 or 8 feet high, will be necessary. A public road thus guarded passes through the Regent's Park of London, at the Zoological Gardens. It has the objection that the fence, with its necessary gates at every crossing of the park drives, roads or paths, is not only a great inconvenience but a disagreeable object in the landscape. To avoid a similar disfigurement, an important passage across the garden of the Tuileries is closed by gates at night, forcing all who would otherwise use it to go a long distance to the right or left. The form and position of the Central Park are peculiar in respect to this difficulty, and such that precedent in dealing with it is rather to be sought in the long and narrow boulevards of some of the old continental cities of Europe, than in the broad parks with which, from its area in acres, we are most naturally led to compare it. The boulevards referred to are, however, generally used only as walks, not as drives or places of ceremony. In frequent instances, in order not to interrupt their alleys, the streets crossing them are made in the form of causeways and carried over on high arches. This, of course, destroys all landscape effect, since it puts an abrupt limit to the view. Some expedient is needed for the central park by which the convenience of the arrangement may be retained, while the objection is as far as possible avoided. The present design. In the plan herewith offered to the Commission, each of the transverse roads is intended to be sunk so far below the general surface that the park drives may, at every necessary point of intersection, be carried entirely over it, without any obvious elevation or divergence from their most attractive routes. The banks on each side will be walled up to the height of about 7 feet, thus forming the protective barrier required by police considerations, and a little judicious planting on the tops or slopes of the banks above these walls will, in most cases, entirely conceal both the roads and the vehicles moving in them, from the view of those walking or driving in the park. 1. If the position which has just been taken with regard to the necessity for permanently open transverse thoroughfares is found to be correct, it follows necessarily that the 700 acres allowed to the new park must, in the first instance, be subdivided definitely, although it is to be hoped to some extent invisibly, into 5 separate and distinct sections, only connected here and there by roads crossing them, and if the plan of making these thoroughfares by sunken roads is approved, they will, as it appears to us, from the nature of the ground, have to be laid down somewhat on the lines indicated on the plan. If so, the problem to be solved is narrowed in its dimensions, and the efforts of the designer can be no longer directed to an arrangement that shall agreeably use up the space of 700 acres allotted, but to making some plan that shall have unity of effect as a whole, and yet avoid collision in its detailed features with the intersecting lines thus suggested. It is on this basis that the present plan has, in the first instance, been founded. If the sunken transverse roads were omitted, the design would not be less complete in character, but it is, on the other hand, so laid out that the transverse thoroughfares do not interfere materially with its general or detailed effect. Surface transverse roads. After having planned the park drives agreeably to these views, we observed that 3 additional moderately direct, transverse roads had occurred. These will afford facilities for crossing the park to all vehicles of classes which it will be proper to admit upon them, such as hackney coaches and all private carriages, and thus 7 transverse roads will be really provided to be used during daylight. 4 roads will probably be amply adequate for the night traffic needing to cross the park, but it might be questioned if this number would be sufficient during the day. The exterior. As it is not proposed that the park proper shall be lighted at night, it is well worthwhile to consider if the advantages which it offers as an interesting promenade may not yet in some way be obtained at night. 5th Avenue. 8th Avenue Railroad. The ordinance that regulates the width of 5th Avenue provides for an open space of 15 feet on each side, exclusive of that required for the sidewalks and the roadway. Consequently, a space of 30 feet in width is already prepared for on this side of the park for its whole length. On the 8th Avenue a similar arrangement may probably be effected, and as there would be no occasion to back up carts against the park side of the avenue, It is feasible to carry the railway tracks close to the edge of the walk, thus leaving a clear space for carriages on the opposite or building side and making the access to the park side more clean and convenient. 2. 59th and 106th Streets. On the southern boundary it is not desirable to reduce the already moderate width of the carriageway. It is, on the other hand, a question whether, as the streets and the park both, in reality, are the property of one owner, the city, this street should not be treated in a similar manner. It will, from its position, be in time rather crowded with traffic, and will, therefore, have some claim to be widened on this ground alone. As a question of beauty of arrangement for the park itself, however, it is conceived that if by this management a more stately character than could otherwise be obtained would be secured to the outer boundaries of the park, it would be cheaply purchased at the sacrifice of a few feet at the south end, of its present length of 2.5 miles. In riding along any of the avenues, the eye cannot fail to be struck with the great difference in dignity of effect, between such streets as 14th and 23rd, and those intermediate, and it would be a matter of regret that a source of effect so easily obtained, should be lost in connection with the grand approaches to the park, because it does not happen that its boundaries at present coincide with the wide streets laid out on the working plan upon which the city is being constructed. If, moreover, the advantage of the evening promenade is allowed to be of importance, we should be sorry to dispense with this section of it, which would be the only portion having a direct communication from the 6th and 7th Avenues. Treatment of boundary lines. For the purpose of concealing the houses on the opposite side of the street, from the park, and to ensure an umbrageous horizon line, it is proposed, as will be seen in the plan, to plant a line of trees all around the outer edge of the park, between the sidewalk and the roadway. 3. On approaching the 5th and 8th Avenue entrances, this line of trees along 59th Street will come prominently into view, and have a handsome effect, if the street is widened, but if 59th Street is allowed to remain as a narrow street, it is feared that it will be difficult to prevent this boundary line of the park from having a contracted and somewhat mean appearance. Hence, we have thought it proper in our plan to assume the advantage and practicability of this arrangement to be conceded, but, if this should not be the case, it will be readily perceived that it forms no essential part of our design. 4. On the space originally provided for a sidewalk on the park side of the streets and avenues, there will, in any case, be room for such a line of trees as we have proposed. The continuous exterior mall should by no means be given up, even though it cannot be made in all parts as wide as we have proposed. At many points, and frequently for quite long distances, it will form an elevated terrace, commanding extensive views over the park, of the most interesting character, and a mere parapet wall 3 or 4 feet high, will, in such cases, be all sufficient for the safety of promenaders and the protection of the park from interlopers. 5th Avenue entrance. The finest approach from the city is certain to be along the 5th Avenue, and it has been thought necessary to view with special care the angle of the park first reached from this direction, because it will be generally felt that immediate entrance should be had at this point. 5. The grade of the avenue has been established so high that considerable filling in would be required to avoid a rapid descent, but directly this single difficulty is overcome, the ground beyond has great advantages for the purpose of a dignified entrance to the park. A massive rock that will be found in connection with this requisite made ground offers a sufficiently large natural object to occupy the attention, and will at once reduce the artificial feature to a position of minor importance. If, next, we stand upon that portion of the rock which, a little north of the large cherry tree, is at great height, we find that there is another rocky hillock within a short distance, in the direction a visitor to the park would most naturally pursue, that is to say, towards the center of the park. This can be easily reached by slightly raising the intermediate ground, by then sweeping to the right. The natural conformation of the surface offers an easy ascent, by the existing cartway over 63rd Street, to a plateau, 2 rods west of the Powder House, directly connected with the extensive tableland which occupies the center of the lower half of the park. From this plateau, now occupied mainly by the nursery, a view is had of nearly all the park up to the reservoir, in a northerly direction, and on looking to the south and west, we perceive that there are natural approaches from these directions, which suggest that we have arrived at a suitable point of concentration for all approaches which may be made from the lower part of the city to the interior of the park. The Avenue. Vista Rock, the most prominent point in the landscape of the lower park, here first comes distinctly into view, and fortunately in a direction diagonal to the boundary lines, from which it is desirable to withdraw attention in every possible way. We therefore accept this line of view as affording an all-sufficient motive to our further procedure. Although averse on general principles to a symmetrical arrangement of trees, we consider it an essential feature of a metropolitan park, that it should contain a grand promenade, level, spacious, and thoroughly shaded. This result can in no other way be so completely arrived at, as by an avenue, which in itself even, exclusive of its adaptability for this purpose, contains so many elements of grandeur and magnificence, that it should be recognized as an essential feature in the arrangement of any large park. The objection to which it is liable is that it divides the landscape into 2 parts, and it is therefore desirable to decide at what point this necessity can be submitted to with the least sacrifice to the general effect. The whole topographical character of the park is so varied, so suggestive of natural treatment, so picturesque, so individual in its characteristics, that it would be contrary to common sense to make the avenue its leading feature, or to occupy any great extent of ground for this special purpose. It must be subservient to the general design, if that general design is to be in accordance with the present configuration of the ground, and we have therefore thought that it should, so far as possible, be complete in itself, and not become a portion of any of the leading drives. There is no dignity of effect to be produced by driving through an avenue 1/4 mile long, unless it leads to, and becomes an accessory of, some grand architectural structure, which itself, and not the avenue, is the ultimatum of interest. An avenue for driving in should be 2 or 3 miles long, or it will be petite and disappointing. We have therefore thought it most desirable to identify the idea of the avenue with the promenade, for which purpose 1/4 mile is not insufficient, and we can find no better place for such a grand mall, or open-air hall of reception, as we desire to have, than the ground before us. 6. The promenade. In giving it this prominent position, we look at it in the light of an artificial structure on a scale of magnitude commensurate with the size of the park, and intend in our design that it should occupy the same position of relative importance in the general arrangement of the plan that a mansion should occupy in a park prepared for private occupation. The importance that is justly connected with the idea of the residence of the owner in even the most extensive private grounds, finds no parallel in a public park, however small, and we feel that the interest of the visitor, who, in the best sense is the true owner in the latter case, should concentrate on features of natural, in preference to artificial, beauty. Many elegant buildings may be appropriately erected for desirable purposes in a public park, but we conceive that all such architectural structures should be confessedly subservient to the main idea, and that nothing artificial should be obtruded on the view as an ultimatum of interest. The idea of the park itself should always be uppermost in the mind of the beholder. Holding this general principle to be of considerable importance, we have preferred to place the avenue where it can be terminated appropriately at one end with a landscape attraction of considerable extent, and to relieve the south entrance with only so much architectural treatment as may give the idea that due regard has been paid to the adornment of this principal promenade, without interfering with its real character. This avenue may be considered the central feature in our plan for laying out the lower park, and the other details of arrangement are more or less designed in connection with it. Parade ground. To the west is the parade ground, containing about 25 acres, that may, at a moderate expense, be leveled and made suitable for its purpose. Winking sad smiley 7, and also some 8 or 10 acres of broken ground, that will be more or less available for military exercises. Such a broad open plain of well-kept grass would be a refreshing and agreeable feature in the general design, and would bear to be of much greater extent than is here shown, if the lot were of a different shape, but under the circumstances, 25 acres seems as much as can well be spared for the purpose. A military entrance from 8th Avenue is proposed to be made at 69th Street, which has been already, at considerable expense, cut through the rock at this point, and offers a suggestion for a picturesque approach, with a portcullis gate, and with the main park drive carried over it at a higher level. Playground. The natural southern boundary of the tableland occupied by the parade ground is a rapid slope that occurs about in the line of 66th Street. In this slope it is proposed to sink one of the transverse roads, and on a level plain below it, stretching to the south, a playground about 10 acres in extent is located, as indicated on the plan. We have thought it very desirable to have a cricket ground of this size near the southern boundary of the park, and not far from the 6th and 8th Avenue railroads, which offer the most rapid means of access from the lower part of the city. 8. In this playground, sites are suggested for 2 buildings of moderate dimensions, one for visitors to view the games, which would be appropriately located on a large rock that overlooks the ground, and the other for the players, at the entrance from the transverse road, by which an exit could be obtained from the playground after the other gates were closed. 9. Only one mass of rock of any considerable magnitude would require to be blasted out for the purpose of adapting this ground to its intended purpose. Its position is indicated on the plan by a red cross, and the object of its removal will be seen on examination. This part of the design is illustrated in study number 2. The ground at the southwest corner of the park it is proposed to fill in sufficiently to make, on the plan indicated, an agreeable 8th Avenue entrance. The lower lake. To the southeast of the promenade, and between the 5th and 6th Avenue entrances, it is proposed to form a lake of irregular shape, and with an area of 8 or 9 acres. This arrangement has been suggested by the present nature of the ground, which is low and somewhat swampy. It is conceived that, by introducing such an ornamental sheet of water into the composition at this point, the picturesque effect of the bold bluffs that will run down to its edge and overhang it, must be much increased. Winking sad smiley 10. And that by means of such a natural boundary, this rocky section of the park will be rendered more retired and attractive as a pleasant walk or lounge. The proposed effect of this part of the design, as it will appear from the 5th Avenue entrance, is indicated on study number 1.11, the Arsenal. To the southeast of the promenade will be found that portion of the park in which the present arsenal is situated. This ground is undulating and agreeable in its character, and will offer pleasant opportunities for shady walks. The arsenal itself, although at present a very unattractive structure, and only tolerably built, contains a great deal of room in a form that adapts it very well to the purposes of a museum. It is proposed, therefore, to improve its external appearance so far as may be necessary, without changing its shape or usefulness, or going to any great expense, and as it occurs rather near the 5th Avenue entrance, and is, therefore, likely to occupy too considerable a share of attention if left exposed to view from the south, it is intended, as early as possible, to plant in its vicinity forest trees, calculated to become handsome specimens of large size, and that will, after a few years, prevent the museum from attracting an undue share of attention in the general landscape. Music Hall. To the east of the promenade, there will be a half-mile stretch of lawn and trees extending from the vicinity of 59th Street to 72nd Street, and this will be the dress ground of the park, and in a prominent position on this ground, and immediately connected with the Grand Mall, the site for a music hall, called for in our instructions, has been set apart, and we have suggested that a palm house and large conservatory should be added to this music hall whenever it is built. 12. This site is recommended because it is conspicuous without being obtrusive, and is easy of access from the promenade and from one of the leading avenue entrances, while, to the north, It commands from its terraces and verandas the finest views that are to be obtained in the lower part of the park. It also overlooks the site which we have selected as most appropriate for the flower garden called for in our instructions, and this we consider a decided advantage, as the most attractive view of a flower garden is from some point above it. That will enable the visitor to take in at a glance a general idea of the effect aimed at. The flower garden. The garden is located in low ground to the northeast of the promenade, and close upon the line of Fifth Avenue, the grade of which opposite the center of the garden is about 20 feet above the present level of the ground. This, for the reasons above stated, we consider a desideratum, and have suggested that over the arcade or veranda that we propose should be built against the east wall of the park in connection with the garden, a structure should be erected, with an entrance on a level with the avenue, so as to give an opportunity for a view of the garden, both from this level and from another story above it. This idea is not, of course, necessary to the design, and the sketch submitted is merely a suggestion to show what may be done at some future time. 13. The plan of the flower garden itself is geometrical, and it is surrounded by an irregular and less formal plantation of shrubs that will serve to connect it with the park proper. In the center it is proposed to construct a large basin for a fountain, with a high jet. Other smaller jets are prepared for, as indicated, and, in connection with the north wall, which will be somewhat below the surface of the ground beyond, it is proposed to arrange some such wall fountain as the celebrated one of Trevi. The water for this fountain will, in the present case, be supplied from the skating pond and also from the reservoir, and will fall into a semicircular marble basin, with a paved floor. Such a fountain is out of place unless it can be furnished with an ample supply of water, but, in the position assigned to it on our plan, there will be no difficulty in procuring all the water that can be required for the purpose, and it seems desirable, therefore, to take advantage of the opportunity offered, for the effect of a sculptured fountain of this sort is quite distinct from that produced by a jet d'eau. A colored plan of this part of the design is illustrated to an enlarged scale on study number 11. To the northwest of the promenade is a slope, offering an appropriate site for a summer house, that in such a situation should have some architectural pretension, and further to the west, near 8th Avenue, is a stretch of tableland, terminated by an abrupt rocky descent, that suggests itself as well suited for a casino or refreshment house. 14. From the upper end of the promenade the rocky hillside to the north, surmounted by Vista Rock at its highest point, comes in full view, and on this rock it will be generally conceded a tower should be erected, but by no means a large one, or the whole scale of the view will be destroyed. 15. To the north and northwest of the promenade, a tract of low ground is proposed to be converted into the skating pond called for in our instructions, and the picturesque scenery between Vista Rock and the promenade will thus be heightened in effect, when seen from the south side of this lake, of about 14 acres. A terrace approach, as shown on the plan, and on study number 3, is proposed, from the avenue to the water. 16. This feature, although by no means absolutely necessary, would add much to the general effect, and could be introduced at any future time, if it is preferred at present to treat the ground occupied by it in a less artificial style. Immediately in the vicinity of Vista Rock is the south wall of the present reservoir. This wall occupies the whole of the middle of the park, and is a blank, uninteresting object, that can in no way be made particularly attractive. We have therefore thought it necessary to bear this in mind in arranging the general plan, and have given a direction to the lines of drive leading this way from the lower part of the park, that will enable them to avoid the wall of the reservoir altogether. 17. The necessity for doing this has induced us to commence diverting the lines of drive at the south end of the Grand Promenade, which seems to offer a sufficient reason for so doing, and to lead them afterwards on their northerly course, in such a way that they may pass naturally to the east and west of the reservoir. If any drive proceeded in the direction of the line of avenue, and at once crossed the ground proposed to be occupied by the lake, the reservoir would inevitably become the terminal feature of the lower part of the park, and this would be disagreeable. The skating pond will offer a sufficiently natural barrier to this direct mode of proceeding, and will furnish a reason for locating the promenade in its proposed position, and also for terminating it where suggested, and by carrying a road along the edge of the water, an opportunity will be given to lengthen out the drive commanding the principal views in this vicinity. The lake will also help to give a retired and agreeable character to the hillside beyond, which is well adapted for picnic parties and pleasant strolls. Even if the reservoir did not occur in its present position, the conformation of the ground is such that the roads would naturally take, to a considerable extent, the direction indicated, leaving the center of the park undivided by a drive. The management of the ground between the skating pond and Vista Rock, 18, appears to be indicated by its form and the character of its present growth. It is well sheltered, and large masses of rock occur at intervals. The soil is moist, and altogether remarkably well adapted to what is called in Europe an American garden, that is, a ground for the special cultivation of hardy plants of the natural order Ericaceae, consisting of rhododendrons, andromedas, azaleas, kalmias, rhodoras, and c. 19. The present growth, consisting of sweet gum, spice bush, tulip tree, sassafras, red maple, black oak, azalea, andromeda, and c. is exceedingly intricate and interesting. The ground is at present too much encumbered with stone, and with various indifferent plants. 20. By clearing these away, and carefully leaving what is valuable, by making suitable paths, planting abundantly, as above suggested, and introducing fastigiate shrubs and evergreens occasionally, to prevent a monotony of bushes, the place may be made very charming. Where the hillside approaches the lake, sufficient openings are proposed to be left for occasional glimpses, or more open views, of the water, and glades of fine turf are intended to occur at favorable intervals, so as to offer pleasant spots for rest and recreation. Playground. To the east and southeast of the present reservoir, the general conformation of the surface continues to be of the same easy, undulating character as that to the east of the promenade, and can be treated in a similar manner. The whole space is intended to be occupied with stretches of well-kept turf, with fine groups and single trees, so planted that they may appear to advantage, and not crowd each other. That portion which is immediately east of the reservoir is set apart for one of the playgrounds winking sad smiley 21, and in the strip of land between the main drive and the reservoir wall, a reserved garden is provided for, with gardener's house attached. This will be needed in connection with the flower garden already described. On the west side of the reservoir the ground is of an irregular character, which continues past the old and new reservoirs to the upper end of the site. The spaces remaining for park use will, however, be so much contracted by the reservoir walls and embankments, that extended landscape effects are out of the question. Winter Drive. It is intended, therefore, as the soil and situation are adapted to the purpose, to arrange in this locality a winter drive about 1.5 miles in length, and to plant somewhat thickly with evergreens, introducing deciduous trees and shrubs occasionally, to relieve the monotony of effect that otherwise might occur. Large open glades of grass are introduced among these plantations of evergreens, as the effect aimed at is not so much that of a drive through a thick forest, crowded with tall spindling trees, as through a richly wooded country, in which the single trees and copses have had plenty of space for developing their distinctive characteristics to advantage. 22. Show walks. Immediately south and west of the present reservoir, terraces have been already formed, and these can readily be converted into continuous arbors, or show walks. Access will thus be provided to all the gates of the reservoir, and the wall will itself be planted out. The effect of these closely shaded walks will also, it is conceived, offer an agreeable contrast to the views obtainable from Vista Rock, in the immediate vicinity. 23. In the northern section of this locality, and in connection with one of the transverse roads, will be found the house of the superintendent, the office of the commission, the police station, and other necessary buildings, such as stables, and c. The site is not far from the one at present occupied by the police, and is thought to be well suited for its purpose. By making a private entrance along the wall of the reservoir, the whole establishment can be immediately connected, by means of the transverse road, with the city streets, and at the same time be central and elevated without being unpleasantly prominent. It is proposed, as will be seen on the plan, to make short connections from the park roads to the transverse thoroughfare north of the present reservoir, so as to admit of visitors, shortening the drive in this way if preferred. Reservoir Ride. The new reservoir, with its high banks, will take up a great deal of room in the park, and although it will offer a large sheet of water to the view, it will be at too high a level to become a landscape attraction from the ordinary drives and walks. It is suggested, therefore, that all round it a ride shall be constructed, and carefully prepared for this purpose only, and although this feature may be somewhat costly in the first instance, it is conceived that the result would be worth the outlay, for the sake of its advantages as a ride over 1.5 miles in length, commanding the view of the reservoir, and uninterfered with by the regular drives, although in connection with them at different points. 24. On the east of the new reservoir, the park is diminished to a mere passageway for connection, and it will be difficult to obtain an agreeable effect in this part of the design, unless some architectural character is given to it. It is not recommended, however, to attempt any such effect immediately, or out of the funds of the Commission, but to accept the high bank of the reservoir as a barrier to the west, for a few years, because it is thought that as soon as this part of the city is built up to any considerable extent, it will not be difficult to obtain an enriched architectural effect, appropriate to the purpose, without expense to the Commission. An arcade, 100 feet deep, could be substantially built, and the drive could be carried above this arcade on a level with the reservoir, and overlooking Fifth Avenue, the remainder of the ground being filled in, and it is thought that as this arcade may be lighted from the rear, and will face a fashionable thoroughfare, it will offer, at no distant period, very valuable lots for stores, or other purposes, and as it is 1/3 of a mile in extent, it may be a source of revenue, in rent, to the Park Fund, instead of a burden on it. 25. Tower on Bogaduce Hill. The northwesterly portion of the park, above the new reservoir, is planned very simply, in accordance with what we conceive to be the suggestion of the ground. The evergreen drive is continued nearly to the foot of Bogaduce Hill, and then somewhat changing its character, turns to the east. At this point a branch road crosses a brook, that is made to expand into a pool a little below the bridge, and this road then winds gradually to the top of the hill, which offers an available site for some monument of public importance, that may also be used as an observatory tower. If, as is not improbable, the transatlantic telegraph is brought to a favorable issue, while the park is in an early stage of construction, many reasons could, we think, be urged for commemorating the event by some such monument as the one suggested on the plan, and in study number 9. The picturesque effect of a spring of clear water, that already exists in this vicinity, may be heightened, as suggested in study number 10. The central portion of the upper section of the park is left as open as possible, and can be leveled so far as may be required for the purposes of the playgrounds indicated on the plan, and on study number 7. At present, it is hardly thought that it would be necessary to make the Sixth Avenue entrance to the north, but its position is indicated. 26. The northeast section of the upper park is shown as an arboretum of American trees, so that everyone who wishes to do so may become acquainted with the trees and shrubs that will flourish in the open air in the northern and middle sections of our country. The Arboretum. This arboretum is not intended to be formally arranged, but to be so planned that it may present all the most beautiful features of lawn and woodland landscape, and at the same time preserve the natural order of families, so far as may be practicable. The botanical student will thus be able to find any tree or shrub without difficulty. We have selected this tract, of about 40 acres, in the upper angle of the site, so as to interfere with the more special requirements of the park as little as possible. The spot chosen is in some measure separated from the rest of the grounds, by a ridge of land between 5th and 6th Avenues, and includes the buildings on Mount St. Vincent. The wooden structures would be removed, and the brick chapel converted into a museum and library of botany, similar to that at Kew, but with more specific regard to landscape and decorative gardening. In the park itself there will be numerous specimens of all the trees, native or foreign, that are likely to thrive, but it is proposed to limit this particular collection to American trees, because the space necessary for a complete arboretum would occupy several hundred acres, and also because it will afford an opportunity to show the great advantage that America possesses in this respect. No other extratropical country could furnish 1/4 the material for such a collection. In the whole of Great Britain, for example, there are less than 20 trees, native to the island, that grow to be over 30 feet in height, while in America we have from 5 to 6 times that number. There are, indeed, already over 40 species of the largest native trees standing in the park, which is nearly equivalent to the number to be found in all Europe. It is proposed to plant from 1 to 3 examples of each species of tree on open lawn, and with sufficient space about each to allow it to attain its fullest size with unrestricted expanse of branches. The effect of each tree is also to be exhibited in masses, so as to illustrate its qualities for grouping. Space is provided to admit of at least 3 specimens of every native which is known to flourish in the United States north of North Carolina, also for several specimens of every shrub. These latter, however, except in particular instances, are not expected to be planted singly, but in thickets, and as underwood to the coppice masses, as may best accord with their natural habits, and be most agreeable to the eye. Further details of this part of the design will be found in the explanatory guide to the Arboretum, submitted with the plan, in which the proposed arrangement of all the trees is set forth in order. The leading features of the plan have now, it is thought, been referred to. It has not been considered necessary to especially particularize the different trees proposed to be used in the various parts of the park. For the purposes of the avenue, the American elm naturally suggests itself at once as the tree to be used, and it is to be hoped that the fine effect this produces, when planted in regular lines, may in a few years be realized in the Central Park. There is no other part of the plan in which the planting calls for particular mention, except to the south of the skating pond. An opportunity is there offered for an exhibition of semi-tropical trees, and it is intended to treat that portion of the park in the manner suggested in the study. A list of the trees to be used is appended to the explanation of the Arboretum. The plan does not show any brooks, except a small one in connection with the pool at the foot of Bogaduce Hill, which can always be kept full by the waste of water from the new reservoir. Mere rivulets are uninteresting, and we have preferred to collect the ornamental water in large sheets, and to carry off through underground drains the water that at present runs through the park in shallow brooks. As a general rule, we propose to run footpaths close to the carriage roads, which are intended to be 60 feet wide, allowing a space of 4 feet of turf as a barrier between the drive and the path. Other more private footpaths are introduced, but it is hardly thought that any plan would be popular in New York that did not allow of a continuous promenade along the line of the drives, so that pedestrians may have ample opportunity to look at the equipages and their inmates. It will be perceived that no long straight drive has been provided on the plan. This feature has been studiously avoided, because it would offer opportunities for trotting matches. The popular idea of the park is a beautiful open space, in which quiet drives, rides, and strolls may be had. This cannot be preserved if a race course, or a road that can readily be used as a race course, is made one of its leading attractions. First study of design for the Central Park. From a woodcut made in 1858. Map of the Central Park, 1868. Footnotes. 1. Note, 1868. In execution, the 4 traffic roads have been carried through the park in the manner suggested. 2. Note, 1868. The sidewalks have been treated in execution as proposed, but the suggestion in regard to the railroad has not yet been carried out. In the Brooklyn Park, however, the intended arrangement has been fully realized. 3. Note, 1868. This feature of the design has been partially carried into execution and is in progress from year to year, as the street and avenue grades become settled. 4. Note, 1868. In execution, 59th Street has been treated as here recommended. 5. Note, 1868. We submitted a plan for a much-needed amplification in this approach during the earlier stage of the work, but the suggestion has not yet been acted on. 6. Note, 1868. In execution, this avenue has been planted with elms, as suggested later in the report, and is now called the Mall. 7. Note, 1868. A parade ground was demanded by the schedule of instructions furnished to competitors. In execution, this open space under the name of the Green has been retained as a prominent feature of the design, but has not been and is not intended to be used for military exercises. 8. The playground has been arranged as here recommended. 9. Note, 1868. The foundation for this building was laid during the last season. 10. Note, 1868. An improvement of the soil and of the skylines of this rocky section, contemplated at the time the plan was made, was last year carried into execution, by means of earth filling on the more prominent summit levels. 11. Note, 1868. The original requirements of the Commission in regard to boundary and expense necessitated, in the first study, a cramped and unsatisfactory arrangement of the entrances on 59th Street. We have since made studies for the amplification of each of the principal approaches, and the necessary legislation in regard to the entrance at 8th Avenue and 59th Street having been obtained at the instance of the property owners in the neighborhood. This improvement is shown on the map of the park, dated 1868. 12. Note, 1868. This site is now occupied by a building which we designed for a ladies' restaurant, sites on a somewhat larger scale being reserved for a music hall and conservatory, which yet remain to be erected. 13. Note, 1868. While the construction of the park was in progress, Messrs. Parsons and Company, who held a contract granted by the commissioners, employed us to develop this general idea in the form of a two-story glass building, of which the upper section is the conservatory proper and the lower portion is proposed to be used for the exhibition and sale of flowers, but the design has not yet been executed. 14. Note, 1868. This ground still remains unimproved, it being the intention to develop the idea referred to in the report, although the plans for the structure are not yet finally decided on. 15. Note, 1868. The foundations for this work were commenced last season on a rocky promontory which formed a part of the Croton Reservoir enclosure when it was expected to be bounded by street lines, but which has lately been added to the park territory, in accordance with our suggestion. 16. Note, 1868. The architectural treatment of the terrace approach has been developed in detail during the progress of the work, but much of the intended effect still remains to be realized. 17. Note, 1868. In execution, the lines have been carried out as here indicated, and as the trees grow up, the old square reservoir is less and less thought of as an obstruction in the composition. 18. Note, 1868. The ground here referred to is now called the Ramble. 19. Note, 1868. This suggestion has been partially realized but yet remains to be fully developed. 20. Note, 1868. Many of these which we have marked for removal, have hitherto, for various reasons, been allowed to remain. 21. Note, 1868. This tract of ground is now recommended as the site for the formal flower garden in connection with a group of architectural structures that will include music hall, art galleries, horticultural and other museums, and refreshment rooms on a liberal scale, the intention of allowing military exercises on the park having been abandoned, and the green serving the purpose of the playground above proposed. 22. Note, 1868. These plantations have been made as designed. 23. Note, 1868. The idea of the Bershow Walk has been carried out in execution on the south side of the reservoir. 24. Note, 1868. In execution, the design of this separate bridle road has been much amplified. 25. Note, 1868. In execution, the simpler plan above suggested was adopted, and the arrangement will probably remain intact for a number of years. 26. Note, 1868. The postponement of operations in this quarter was recommended because we found that the 106th Street boundary of the park required a revision, which could not, with propriety, be urged when the competition plan was made. The northern limit of the park was, subsequently to the date of this report, extended from 106th to 110th STS, and so much of the original plan as applied to the ground to the northward of that here described, was afterwards modified in order to connect satisfactorily with our design for laying out the additional territory which was approved by the Commission in April, 1863. Transcribers note obvious typographical errors and punctuation errors have been corrected after careful comparison with other occurrences within the text and consultation of external sources. Some hyphens in words have been silently removed, some added, when a predominant preference was found in the original book. Except for those changes noted below, misspellings in the text, and inconsistent or archaic usage, have been retained. pg 22, character replaced by character. Asterisk 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 end of the Project Gutenberg ebook description of a plan for the improvement of the Central Park asterisk 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 updated editions will replace the previous one, the old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works, by using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg. You agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Trademark Symbol Electronic Works 1.0. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e. Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg, 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. 1.e.5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. 1.e.6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg trademark symbol website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. 1.e.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f1.f.1. Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2. Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages, except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the Foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3. Limited right of replacement or refund, If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4 Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3, this work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5 Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6 Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion and distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, and C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg trademark symbol's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg trademark symbol and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's IN or Federal Tax Identification Number is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, UT 84116, 801-596-1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways including checks, online payments and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the US unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks.